Welcome back to the Human First CEO series on LinkedIn Live. I'm Nick Maida, CEO of Gainsight, and every week I get a chance to interview CEOs that I respect and admire to hear about how they think about leading success for all of their stakeholders in their business. With me this week is Dan Streetman, CEO of TIBCO. Dan and I have gotten to know each other over the years. I've been such a big admirer of not just the business that he runs, but how he leads his team and his company. Welcome, Dan.
Hey, Nick. Great to be here.
It is awesome seeing you. Seriously, it's been awesome spending time with you previously in person and now over video. And it's really, I've learned a lot by talking to you. As we'll talk about, Dan has an incredible background, having spent time at Salesforce and BMC and C3, which just went public, Amdocs, Siebel. You've worked at a lot of the kind of legendary companies in tech, and it's awesome seeing you here. So thank you.
Hey, great to be here, Nick. And again, all those things are just experience that you build on, right?
Yeah, totally. And we'll talk about some of those in a little bit more detail. So let's talk about, though, before we get into the details, you're obviously quarantined, I think, in the East Bay of the Bay Area. Is that right?
I'm actually quarantined now in the Lake Tahoe area.
Oh, in Tahoe. Okay, great. So you're in Tahoe. That's okay. That's not the worst place to be.
Yeah, my family is a very outdoors and adrenaline-oriented family. So it's a good place for us to be.
That's awesome. Well, hopefully the snow is going to be good this winter. I'm sure you'll get a lot of time to enjoy it. So that'll be good. What are you looking forward to doing after quarantine's over that you can't do right now?
It's a great question. So first, anytime you talk about quarantine, you have to pause for a minute and recognize, right? It's, has a dramatic impact, particularly on those less fortunate, right? And has the worst and disproportionate impact on them. But for our family, right, there's certainly been some silver linings. I'm a backcountry skier, so I've been able to get out and do that. I've been able to do some other adrenaline things, but the one thing I haven't been able to do that I love to do is race in Ironman triathlons. So this will be the first year in 10 years that I haven't been able to do one. So I'm really looking forward to that again. And I think the other racing I'd love to see is I'd love to get back out and see our Formula One team race again. We work really closely with the Mercedes AMG F1 team. They had a phenomenal year, and I love being in there in the pit and working with them. And that's been one thing we haven't been able to do this year either. So I guess that's two things I'd like to do.
Those are two good ones to do. I would love to go see a Formula One race, and I'd love to go watch an Ironman race. I don't know if I can do an Ironman triathlon, but I'll come watch one of yours. So
watching Formula One is a lot more exciting than watching an Ironman.
That's probably true.
We'll prioritize going to see Lewis first. Yeah.
I love it. Well, we're gonna talk about all the stakeholders that you think of in running your business. The community, your team, your customers. But there's something unique with your background I wanted to start off on because obviously everyone brings their own experiences to bear in how they lead. And if you look up Dan on LinkedIn, in addition to an amazing business career, you'll see he went to West Point Military Academy, and then he started his career in the Army and actually won a Bronze Star in the Army as well. And so first of all, thank you for your service. Thanks for what you and everyone else do to keep us safe. And I'm guessing that experience probably taught you a lot about leadership and how you treat other people. So how's that helped shape how you think about leading?
Well, thanks, Nick. It is a great question. And first, on behalf of all those who've done so much more and continue to do so much more to protect our values, I appreciate your thanks for them and all they do. A unique aspect, I did go to West Point. I spent 8 years on active duty. Then I stayed in what's called the Individual Ready Reserve, which is you're not being paid, you're not earning retirement. You're essentially right there if needed. And I was redeployed in 2008. So I went back on active duty and spent 2009 in Baghdad. So clearly that impacts a lot of things I like to do in aspects of helping veterans who I served with, right, who maybe had been in 3 or 4 different combat deployments transition. And I work a lot with them, and I talk, if really we go back to what we learned, most of them are working with programs like Breakline or Vets in Tech, which I'm on the board of, or Salesforce Military, which I started while I was there, and they want to work in IT. And I said, The great part about coming to work in IT is the two most important things you learned were integrity and teamwork. Right? It's not information technology. It's what you bring around being true to who you are, being true to your team, having to be able to count on you, and then bringing that to a team aspect. We're never going to be as good individually as we are as a team. Now, there's plenty of people who can have lots of integrity, but they can have integrity around, I'm looking out for me. I'll respect that. But if you're going to work in technology, it moves so fast with so many different moving parts, you got to be true to who you are. You've got to be clear about that, and you got to bring a teamwork aspect. I don't think that being the military is the only way you learn that, but it's certainly a way that many of us fast forward that. So I work real hard to make sure that we can continue to expand all of our diverse team members, including those from the military. And, you got to build a little bridge to them to make this an easier transition. But every place I've worked, we've benefited a lot from embracing that.
That's awesome. We'll click more into that in a bit. That I think so many leadership lessons in business, if you study their origin, they really did come from the military. Military is kind of where one of the first times in human history where people had to organize to do things, And so, let's talk about when we think about stakeholders, let's start with the community around you. So you've been running TIBCO, which is, for folks that don't know, a very storied company that's had an amazing history. And you came in as kind of the CEO to help take the company to the next level. How do you think about incorporating the community around you at TIBCO? What was TIBCO already doing? And maybe how have you brought your own kind of special passion to the company?
Sure. Well, and I think in light of COVID, right, so it's kind of an important thing to highlight and talk about. And so the first thing we identified at TIBCO was we have TIBCO for Good. So we're involved in lots of nonprofits. In essence, what TIBCO does is help solve complex data challenges, right? We make it possible to use real-time data to make faster, smarter decisions. So no time ever, right, that organizations need to make those kind of shifts than during COVID. So we work with nonprofits like City Harvest in London. Their job got 4 times harder overnight. They had to quarantine, they had to observe social distancing, yet their demand, right, increased tenfold for what they delivered. They basically take produce and deliver it to those who are, food deprived and in tough situations. So we put that first and foremost in everything we did at TIBCO to think about the safety of our team members and the welfare of our communities. We also help some of our customers really transition to think about how they serve their communities. Panera Bread, right? We know Panera Bread. It's kind of like going into a deli. There's a lot of touching and closeness.
Right.
In under 2 weeks, Panera Bread launched Panera Grocery, and they were able to deliver groceries and supplies to, again, areas in need. And they did that all by using TIBCO. So what it's really powerful to me is if we help our communities and our customers leverage the power of data, we can do a lot of great things. And TIBCO for Good is just one aspect of that. That's been really interesting to see go. Finally, right, if you use the power of your technology, you can also really help your communities understand what's going on. So we also launched Gather Smart. We use TIBCO technologies, and in under 6 weeks, we built an application that is a smartphone application for the end user and a control panel based on data for companies, HR, or operations to control the flow into their offices. So you can complete a survey. Do you have the symptoms? To make that a very lightweight, easy to use application. It's free for small companies, and it's at cost for others. So places like Dartmouth University are using Gather Smart to make sure their students can come in and be there. So what I love is if you really think about what our why, right, it's solving complex problems. There have been a lot for us to address in a short amount of time this year.
That's incredible. Yeah, great stories. And what I love is that you're not just using your employees' time or the money that the company has, but your technology as well. You're kind of merging all those together and kind of doing work for good. And I know your past employer, Salesforce, did a great job of that as well, right? Trying to find lots of ways to contribute back. As a leader, how do you think about, where you focus this energy vis-a-vis your own personal kind of vision, like let's say for some of the military causes you talked about versus the views of the company, of the individual employees? Like, how do you decide where to direct all this great effort?
So, the great part is life is filled with win-wins, right? I'm a big fan of embracing the magic of and so when you can use your technology in a way that, of course, advances, right, your company's knowledge and what your company's thinking and helps your communities, your customers, right? Those are win-wins. So, I look for those areas where I can bring either my expertise or our company's expertise to an area where we can make a difference. So all of these things, fortunately, rely on data. And at TIBCO, right, we essentially help our customers and organizations connect to everything.
Right.
We help them intelligently unify that data through data management. And then finally, that gives them the ability to confidently predict. So you can think of use cases across the spectrum where you do that. Our team members grow when we're involved in projects. Our data science team launched actually a COVID-19 dashboard. I mean, there's some really incredible examples of data science at play on tibco.com, COVID-19. And that's great for our team members. We weren't paid for that per se, but we helped our our organizations we work with. We help our pharmaceutical companies really get a good grasp of things like effective retransmission rates and safety. And so it's fun when you can find those win-wins, and life should be all about that.
That's awesome. And one thing you personally impacted, as you talked about at Salesforce, was creating this pathway for military members to come into tech companies, SaaS companies. For folks that are watching, if you wanted to give the 1 minute pitch on why they should be doing more to bring military members into their companies, because I think that's a great cause.
Sure. Well, yeah, like us, right? This is something that I know. I found myself after 10 years, right, in the commercial software world, going back on active duty. I worked with some young women and men who are on their third or fourth deployment, and for whatever reason, they weren't going to be able to continue that. And there really weren't a lot of programs at the time in 2008 helping them bridge. And unemployment among young veterans was about twice what it was right outside their cohort. I'm really happy to say there's a lot more awareness around that. At Salesforce, we focused on creating admins. So let's create a learning path for them so they could become Salesforce admins. We did it free of charge. Awesome. And I then identified a lot of other areas where we could help veterans make that transition. So part of us as companies, it's like, how do I just build that bridge, connect the language a little bit, and go meet any diverse community where they are by understanding their language. So it's not just something that applies to veterans.
Right.
Breakline, one of the organizations we work with, has also launched Breakline Apex, which is about underrepresented communities, right, in software.
That's awesome.
All those same lessons learned, you can expand a little bit more broadly.
That is such a great point. Yeah, it's just about taking that step towards that community, helping to bridge that gap. Yeah. So good segue to talk about the team. I mean, one thing I've always been impressed by is how you lead your team. I know a lot of your team members, both at TIBCO, but also from your past life, and everyone just speaks glowingly about your leadership. So you should definitely blush a little bit, because you are very well respected. And when you think about coming into a company like TIBCO, where it's been around for a long time, it has a great set of technology and values and team. But what's your mix of kind of learning what's already there and then putting your own fingerprint on it? How'd you do that?
So TIBCO is phenomenal at innovation, and the heritage of innovation is really world class. But oftentimes when you're smaller and you're growing, right, you go down on individual moonshots.
Right.
And in the end, when we're talking about bringing together data, what we really kind of lacked was the right level of collaboration, right, and shared consciousness. And I'm a big fan of Stan McChrystal's book, right, about helping create shared consciousness. And he did that with special operations forces, right, during really complicated campaigns, and a lot of that applies.
And you're referring to Team of Teams, I think. Is that Team of Teams?
Team of Teams, that's correct.
Yeah, it's a great book if you're watching. Great read.
Yeah. Team of Teams is a great book about how do you get the whole to function while you still have a team of teams. And for us, that was a key aspect. We had lots of great technologies, right, in Connect, lots of great technologies around unifying your data, and lots around Predict. But helping make sure that we're better together has been a real differentiator for our customers. We had FedEx's CIO, Rob Carter, on at TIBCO now just recently, and you can't think of a more complex organization where, right, there are lots of different functions all happening in once, and to give everybody that shared view is powerful. And, it really makes for a better customer experience as well. Now, that also comes back to clearly, right, how we work with people like Gainsight. Yeah. At TIBCO, we established a principle called customer excellence, right, which is way beyond customer success. And I think that speaks to, in order to do that, you have to be able to collaborate and work together on every level.
That's awesome. I love that. And, you obviously were running TIBCO pre-pandemic, and then we had the interesting adventure we've all been on this year, which is, as you said, much more challenging for so many less privileged people, and the impact is just vast. But there was an impact on your team as well. And I'm curious, like, how if you kind of think back to like how you're going to end up as a leader at the end of this year versus how you started as a leader, like how have you changed personally?
Yeah. So I think first, right, when you go under a crisis like this, it's a difficult time to create a culture. So I do feel very fortunate, right, to have had more than a year leading TIBCO, getting out to see people. My first 70 days, I spent 64 of them traveling to visit as many officers and customers as I could. So that was a great foundation. And I feel for organizations that are going through leadership challenges during this time, because certainly human connection does matter. The great part is, right, the silver lining, there is great technology we can leverage. And in the end, if you're values centered, right, the technology helps extend that and make it work. So for me personally, I think that I've learned to make sure that I've continued to focus on listening. One of the aspects here is it's really easy for you and me to broadcast.
Right.
It's a lot harder for us to listen. So using our technologies to listen more, broadcast a little less is probably my biggest lesson around this transition into COVID, and that these digital means are really good at one to many. They're challenging sometimes at many to one. So if you don't take time to pause and listen to your team to gather feedback, I think you could really, kind of get down a cycle pretty quickly. That's
so well said. Yeah, I've gone through very similar experience, and learning that each person's experience is going to be different. That was kind of a good setup for another question I had, which is, you run also a pretty global company. You got people all over the world. And I can imagine, although everyone in some way is going through COVID together, in many ways, it's very different region to region and based on where we are in the year. Even within the United States, it's different in different places. And then obviously in Asia and other places, it's very different. I'm curious, have you kind of learned something from seeing that experience be so different? And how has that changed how you run TIBCO, knowing that everyone's going through this journey differently?
Well, the first list, you won't be surprised, was to use the data. So, again, using COVID-19 dashboard.
You like data. Yeah, you like data.
Understand, where we were, where the effective retransmission rate, was highest.
Right.
We went to we guided, for example, all of our team members who traveled on mass transit. Before any restrictions were in place, we said, don't come to work. And, also, if you have what we knew, health concerns or family members with health concerns, don't come to work. So the data helped us kind of make that decision and drive it faster. From a cultural perspective, digital also kind of highlights those things. One of the best pieces of advice I received as a leader in general, and it was reinforced this year, as we went through certainly much more awareness around, engagement and inclusion, was the golden rule, I learned was treat others like you would like to be treated.
Right.
And that turns out to be a bad rule.
Right.
Treat others the way they want to be treated and understand how to, reach that common ground. And that's been powerful for us to do. You have to get out of your time zone comfort. We've done all hands calls with our teams, in Asia, and we'll continue to do that. And just finding the mechanisms to make sure that they can connect, your team members can connect back to their leaders is, I think, critically important.
That's so well said. Yeah, I think it's forcing us to be much more inclusive because we're not just trying to do what works for us as the CEO inside, let's say California, wherever your headquarters is, but really try to think about where they are. And yet that golden rule versus platinum rule, I think that's a very, very good point. So it's a good segue to talk about customers, because obviously that's similar kind of spirit applies of the kind of platinum rule of, doing what they would want, not just what you would want. And I kind of think you've probably learned just so much about customer success, having been at Salesforce, which, realistically kind of created this whole thing. And then being at BMC, kind of company in transition, and now at TIBCO. So what did you learn from Salesforce about customer success, and how are you taking it to the next level at TIBCO?
Yeah, so you're right. I learned a lot from working with Mark, and the first really was to create the culture, and a culture that is about stakeholders and multiple stakeholders, not just your shareholders. And if you do that right, everybody wins. And so brought that with me to everything I do and learned that. The other aspect clearly is focus on customer success, and it's been Mark's mantra from the beginning. Salesforce was the first place where I really, saw customer success managers, with the title, and I realized, it can be so much more powerful when you step back and think about the whole process. So for us, we've created a customer excellence organization, and so that includes, our sales engineers and our solutions engineers, all the way through to our customer success team. Because with solving complex data challenges, your key piece is what's the value you're creating, This isn't a widget we're selling, and it's not one view or one dashboard. I mean, this is a solution and a platform. So we start first with what's the problem we're trying to solve, and what's the value if we do that. That's what our solutions engineers and our sales engineers do. Then we go into, all right, how quickly can we start to see that value? So Jeff Hess leads our customer excellence organization. He's working hand in hand with your team. We love the Gainsight team, and it's really a focus on us of taking that end to end throughout the whole customer experience. And I think I've built on, many of the things I learned from Mark, and trying to take it, with our own little piece to the next level.
I love that. And I do think you are taking the next level, as I have told you kind of one-on-one, this idea of bringing pre-sales and kind of the whole journey all together. is very different from customer success as the team that makes sure people don't churn, which kind of is where it started in lots of companies, right? You got to start somewhere. I think where your team is at the forefront. I can imagine that it's more complicated because now you're trying to link all this stuff together. So Jeff, who runs your organization, has to probably get connected into every other part of TIBCO, I'm guessing, right? Yeah.
The beauty of us is we thrive in complexity. I mean, that's essentially, NASA's our customer. We talked about F1. An F1 car in practice throws 50,000 data points a second, right? So if you're looking at one data point, you're going to lose that aspect of it. So it is kind of in our culture, in our focus. And so bringing that into an organization that goes end-to-end focus on customer excellence with the support, right, of a great solution and a great team at Gainsight, I think we're really making a difference for customers. And what that really helps them do is we've had great fans of our technology, but we necessarily haven't captured that idea of what can we solve next. And that's really what we're focused on doing at TIBCO.
And so is a vision of that, from a business perspective, that could then drive faster expansion or higher net retention? Where does that take you from a financial perspective? So
absolutely. Look, that, if you do the right things for customers, the financials follow. So we have seen, right, since implementing customer excellence, far more upsell, far more retention, but we're also getting new logos because we're learning from that and being able to drive new business. So we've really expanded people's view of what we solve. In essence, our tagline in marketing is made possible by TIBCO. And that's whether, you're at the casino like Caesars, who's wrestling with what's going on, to Panera Bread, like I talk about, they've solved some really complex challenges, and that was really made possible by TIBCO.
So just clicking on that new business thing, is what you're saying that your sellers, because you understand the value you're delivering better, are able to sell new customers better? Is that the idea?
In the end, we're solving problems and creating opportunities. So our sellers, because they have this mindset around how do I understand value and then deliver value, they're able to see that pattern matching much better. Now, it's got to be complemented with all the right things you do around enablement and all the right things you do around building your product. But our combined team, just functions so much better when we're working together because we're just much more aware of what's going on around us.
So as people move to this more kind of end-to-end value approach, because I do think you're on the start of kind of what everyone's going to do, does that change the type, the approach a salesperson should take? Do you see salespeople needing to evolve their game as part of this as well?
Yeah, well, it's a lot like what we have to do as CEOs to evolve our game. As I talked about, we're not a broadcast anymore. We're in and help solve the problem. The best thing any account executive can do is ask questions, understand what they're getting at versus trying to come in and say, I've got this, particularly when you have a platform like we have at TIBCO. So the ability to understand the challenges that the business is facing, do the research ahead of time, do the understanding of the customer so you're not wasting their time. But asking questions, your second or your third call is the first time you should be proposing any kind of ideas, right? And that's the biggest thing great account executives learn is, taking on as much data as possible, synthesizing that and providing clarity, for their customers on what that can help them accomplish.
I love it. All right, so let's close it out then. There's some people that probably, they might look at this and maybe it'll be a little bit of a cynical eye. They might say, hey, Nick's talking about human first, Dan's talking about it. I think it's just about the bottom line and shareholder value. All this other stuff is fluff. I respect that opinion. Obviously, I don't agree with it. I'm curious, what do you say to CEOs who, when that's what they think?
Look, it's easy to be cynical about anything in life, right? And so I always look at cynicism as kind of the easy way out. I can always poke a hole, right? We can poke a hole in response to COVID as we're doing it, but it doesn't take away from the broader context. And so you can see time and time again great examples of when organizations thought about their broader community, thought about their broader stakeholders. They stayed focused on their metrics, they used their data, and they thrived. And I think your organization is one of those, and TIBCO is one of those. And look, it doesn't mean we don't make hard calls and hard decisions around the business. We have to do that day in, day out. And the team at TIBCO knows that. We're continuing to make sure we restructure to think about what the future looks like. But you can do that with an eye on your broader values. At TIBCO, our values, align with our acronym. So TIBCO, once upon a time stood for the Integration Bus Company, right? That's not what it stands for anymore. We say it stands for our values. And those are pretty simple. We work together. We are innovative. We are bold. We are customer focused, and we are optimistic.
That's
So
awesome.
it's great when your name, right, reminds everybody day in, day out what it is you're focused on.
That's incredible. That's great. Well, let me close out with some word association just to see what's top of mind for you as we kind of go into 2021. So I'll throw out a few terms and you tell me the first thing that comes to mind. Digital transformation.
Necessity. Everybody, it's made it very clear.
No more discussion. That's debate's over. Data.
Possibility.
I can tell you like data. COVID-19.
Well, it's two things. I'll call it a mixed bag, like we've all identified, right? There are lots of horrible things around this, and my heart goes out to anyone who suffered from it. But it's also made us aware as a society, right? What can be possible, and that we have to digitally transform. So, right, totally mixed bag.
Totally, well, very well said. Customer success.
Well, aside from Gainsight, I'd also say necessity.
Necessity, I like that. And then human first.
I don't even feel like that's a question, right? Human first comes to it. I mean, I love the fact that you asked that. Aside from, again, Nick and Gainsight, it's human first is the way we should all live, right? In the end, right, we're not going to be on this planet for very long, and we're going to not be in the groups we're in. And if you're not coming at it from a human first perspective, you're just missing out on too much of life. And I know this is supposed to be one word association, but
that's very good.
That requires an essay.
I like that, Dan. Thank you so much. It's amazing seeing you. Thanks for all you do for the world and business and being an inspiring leader. And thanks to all of you for watching as well. We'll see you soon.
Likewise, Nick. Great to be here. Thank you.